Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
O greatly fortunate and opulent Śukadeva Gosvami, the time comes when human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions and with such a terrible fate as this conversation that his divine grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, Śukadeva Gosvami has explained that people who commit sinful acts are forced to enter hellish planets and suffer. Now Maharaj corrected, being the devotee, is concerned with how this can be stopped. A Vaiṣṇava is paradukha. In other words, he has no personal trouble, but he is very unhappy to see others in trouble. Prahlāda Maharaj said, My dear Lord, my Lord, I have no personal problems, for I have learned how to glorify the transcendental qualities and thus enter a trance of ecstasy. I do have a problem, however, for I am simply thinking of these rascals and fools who are busy with māyā-sukha, temporary happiness, without knowledge of devotional service and peace. This is the problem faced by a Vaiṣṇava, because a Vaiṣṇava fully takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He personally has no problem, but because he is compassionate toward the fallen, conditioned souls, he is always thinking of plans to save them from the hellish life in this body and the next. Parikshit Maharaj therefore anxiously wanted to know from Śukadeva Gosvami how humanity can be saved from gliding down to hell. Śukadeva Gosvami has already explained how people enter hellish life, and he could also explain how they could be saved from it. Intelligent men must take advantage of these instructions. Unfortunately, however, the entire world is lacking Krishna consciousness, and those people are suffering from the grossest ignorance and do not even believe in a life after this one. To convince them of the next life is very difficult because they have become almost mad in their pursuit of material enjoyment. Nevertheless, our duty, the duty of all sane men, is to save men. Maharaj, in the fifth canto, Śukadeva Gosvami has described to Parikshit Maharaj the hellish planet, that is where the living entity goes for performance different types of simple activities. And till the fifth canto, where Śukadeva Gosvami has described the process of creation. When Parikshit Maharaj first met Śukadeva Gosvami, he did not straight away ask, please give me some information about Krishna's confidential pastimes in Vrindavan. He asked Śukadeva Gosvami to describe how this creation comes into existence. And then Śukadeva Gosvami described how the creation comes into existence. And this is repeated in different passages in the first 5 cantos. And then Parikshit Maharaj was informed how the different living entities also come into existence. Because when it is time for creation, in the corner of the Brahma Jyoti, the mahā-bhāga is created. And then the Lord expands as mahā-Vaiṣṇava, from whom innumerable universes come out, which are being maintained by Sarvadakta Vishnu. Then again the Lord expands as a super soul. And then the material ingredients and the living entities come into existence. And the living entities come into existence contain those who would define the orders of the Lord, or those who wanted to enjoy like the Lord. This is confirmed in the Prema Vivalta. Krishna bhai mukha hana bhoga mantra kare. So the living entity can develop the desire to try and enjoy like the Supreme Lord. He returns back down into this material world where he has to experience nothing but misery. So, Śukadeva Gosvāmī had described to Parikshit Maharaj in the 5th canto how the living entity has to enter into the different hellish planets for the performance of different types of simple activities. And Parikshit Maharaj, naturally being a compassionate devotee of the Lord, as Prabhupada states in the purport, the Vaiṣṇava is paradukha dukhi. That is, the Vaiṣṇava is very compassionate. So Parikshit Maharaj, when he was informed of the different hellish planets, he naturally became very, very alarmed. And therefore, he is now asking this question, how can the living entity be saved from entering into the hellish conditions? So this 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is called the protection of the Lord. The 6th canto is called the protection of the Lord, or Poshana. And through the story of Arjuna, the title of this chapter is The History and Life of Arjuna, and this whole volume talks about Arjuna's history, how he fell down, how later on he was protected by the Vishnu Dutas, and the significance of devotional service. This 6th canto is called Poshana, or protection by the Lord, because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna informs Sampi apratijani nayam bhakta pranashati, that anyone who surrenders unto me, he will definitely be protected. That devotional service never goes in vain. And the example of Arjuna was cited. Arjuna was brought up in Brahmanical culture, then he fell down with the prostitutes, he produced 10 sons, and in old age, when he was about to die, he could see that he had performed evil activities for which he was going to be punished. But he was attached to his younger son, whose name was naraḥ, and when he could see, when he was in anxiety, and when he could see that something dreadful was about to happen, he chanted for his son, naraḥ. And the Vishnu Dutas appeared on the spot and presented the Yamadutas, mainly the representatives of Lord Yamaraj, from taking his soul to hell. It is stated in this volume that one who is a devotee of Lord Narayan, he never has to fear Yamaraj or his agent. And this was very clearly exhibited in the case of Arjuna. Even though Arjuna had fallen down, but still, because he had at one point rented devotional service, that devotional service came to his rescue. So the Vaiṣṇava is defined as paradukha dukhi, and the example cited in the purport is that of Prahlāda Maharaj. You can see in the case of Prahlāda Maharaj that he actually had everything. He was born of very rich parents. His father was a king. His father had unlimited wealth. But Prahlāda refused the opportunity to engage in any type of sense gratification. In fact, Prahlāda was put through severe difficulties in order to be taken away from the Lord. But Prahlāda still refused. And there's innumerable other examples in our Shastras also. Is the example of Haridas Thakur. His devotional service to Krishna was also tested. Haridas was drawn away and he was chained, whipped in 22 different marketplaces. But Haridas still went on chanting the holy names of the Lord. So the Vaiṣṇava is attached to Krishna in all situations, and the Vaiṣṇava is very concerned about the suffering of the humanity. In the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam, there is a description how when Parikshit Maharaj was served by this young Brahminical boy who died within 7 days, Parikshit Maharaj invited all the great sages, and he was questioning the different sages as to what should a person do who is about to die. So Śukadeva Gosvāmī, when he heard this question, he said that your question is very glorious, because the answers to this question are for the benefit of entire human society. Similarly, we see in the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam that Devahuti asked Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, had incarnated as her son. So Devahuti asked Kapila to please describe for my benefit and for the benefit of the people in general, how can one gain freedom from the misery of birth and death? So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 1st chapter, it is stated that the transcendentalist is one whose mind is controlled and who is working for the benefit of others. And Krishna goes on to say that one whose mind is controlled and one who is working for the benefit of others is guaranteed to return to the kingdom of God. The age of Kali is naturally visible everywhere. Just like in the 1st canto we see that when the personality of Kali was beginning to enter, Parikshit Maharaj faced the personality of Kali and said that you can only reside in those areas where the yajna is not being performed. So Parikshit Maharaj told Kali that you can only reside in those areas where there is no yajna being performed. The Prabhupada in the purport to this verse explains that if the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement perform Sanskrit and yajna, then this personality of Kali will not be able to reside in any place. We have to have faith in the words of Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj saw that the personality of Kali was entering and she was beginning to spread her influence. So he very specifically stated that the personality of Kali will only be allowed to reside in that place where no yajna is being performed. And the yajna for this age, as we know, is the Sanskrit yajna. So the point is that in spite of the advancement of the age of Kali, if the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement perform the yajna that is recommended for this age, then the personality of Kali will have to flee from that place. Just like the personality of Kali fled when she saw Parikshit Maharaj. Similarly, the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement have been empowered to perform yajna by which the personality of Kali will have to flee. It's only that we have to have firm faith in the instructions of the great sages and Srila Prabhupada purport. It is not that the personality of Kali cannot be checked. Parikshit Maharaj checked the personality of Kali. He drove the personality of Kali away to one corner. So similarly the devotees, if they understand this Krishna conscious philosophy, if they understand the real mission of human life, then the personality of God will be easily driven away. In the Vishnu Purana and also in the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam, it is stated, Tritiya dhyayato Vishnam Tretayam Yudhakomate Dvapare Parichayayam Kalutadhari Kirtana. That is, in this age of Kali, one can derive the same benefit that one could derive in, say, the Satyuga by Tritiya dhyayato Vishnu, by meditating on Vishnu, or in Treta Yuga by offering sacrifices, or in Dwapara Yuga by worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord. The same benefit can be realized in the Kali Yuga, Kalutadhari Kirtana, by engaging in the kirtan of Krishna. So the point is that the same environment of the Sati Yuga can be revived. The Kali Yuga is advancing, but at the same time, the Lord has given a means by which you can check this. Just like there may be so many diseases on this planet at the moment, but at the same time, there are also medicines by which several of these diseases can be checked. So the age of Kali is definitely progressing, but the Vaiṣṇava, because he has taken shelter of the bona fide spiritual master and the Supreme Lord, he is able to counteract it. In the Bhagavatam it is stated, Satyadhana munayo jnana virāga yathaiva pasyanti atmani chātmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. That is, bhaktya shruta grihitaya. Shruta means to hear. So one who has heard attentively the conclusion of the Vedas, the conclusion of the bona fide scriptures, such an individual develops what is known as jnana. And this jnana is translated into vairagya, renunciation. But this becomes possible because pasyanti atmani chātmana. Because the Lord is situated in the heart of the individual. So the devotees, if they regularly hear the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Vedic scriptures, then the Bhagavatam guarantees that jnana will be there, and this jnana will be translated into vairagya. Because the Lord is in the heart, and He is giving one the necessary intelligence. So the point is that in order to become good spiritual surgeons, we have to get trained up properly. And that training process is this process of Shravanam and Kirtanam. Because if we hear and chant and perform devotion service nicely, then one will be able to counteract and resist the evil influences of this age of Kali. As the Bhagavatam establishes, by and large the people in the age of Kali are not very interested in spiritual life. Praying al paisha sabya kale vasmi yagetanana manda samanda matiya mandya bhage upaditaha. That the people in this age of Kali are not very serious about spiritual life. So the point is that those who take the spiritual life, they have to become very, very serious about it, because they are falling in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj. In the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, Lord Yamraj describes 12 authorities for religion, and Prahlad Maharaj is described to be one of the 12 Mahajans. So the devotees, they follow in the footsteps of the great Mahajans. So Parikshit Maharaj, naturally, as we said, became very alarmed when he heard the description of the hellish planet. That is the nature of the Vaiṣṇava. He doesn't want to see anyone in any miserable condition. The saying in the mature world is the misery like something. But that is not the standard of the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnava, when he sees that somebody else is miserable, when he sees that somebody else is suffering, he also becomes very concerned. He also begins to feel miserable. And the Vaishnava, because his vision is the universal vision. In the verse prior to this that I believe was discussed yesterday, in the 5th verse, Parikshit Maharaj was asking Śukadeva Gosvāmī to please describe how this mature world has been created, how these different planetary systems have been created. So, this same question actually has also appeared before in the 2nd canto. The nature of the Srimad Bhagavatam is, the same question comes up at different stages of the Bhagavatam, and the answers are in more detail as the cantos progress. Because repetition is necessary to drive the point home. just like we see in the Bhagavad Gita. We see in the Bhagavad Gita that the same point is made again and again in different manners. And the message is the same, but it is explained in a slightly different manner. So Parikshit Maharaj had earlier asked in the same section of the Bhagavatam to Śukadeva to describe how these different planets come into existence and what the relationship is of the different living entities. And Śukadeva Gosvāmī has informed that all the different living entities belong to different parts of the Lord's body. For example, the Brahmanas, they represent the mouth, the head of the Lord. The Kshatriyas, also the Vaishyas, they all represent different parts of the body. And all these different planetary systems, which are described to be 14 in number, all these different planetary systems also fall within the universal body of the Lord. So the point is that all living entities belong to the Lord. The materialist will never be able to estimate the nature of God's creation. The Bhagavatam informs that the total mature creation is so vast, it is equal to 2 billion miles multiplied by 2 billion miles. That is the limit of only this mature creation of the Lord, which consists of the 14 planetary systems. So, all the living entities fall in the universal form of the Lord. They're all different parts of the Lord's body. So the point is that they're all related to each other. They're all related to each other because the source of all of them is one. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, Aham bija pradapita. Krishna says that I am the seed-giving father of all living entities. So Krishna is the seed-giving father of all living entities. So the Vaiṣṇava, his vision is that since Krishna is the seed-giving father of all living entities are related to each other. And since all living entities are related to each other, naturally there has to be some concern for each other. The Vaiṣṇava's concept is not that God created some entities for our enjoyment and some that it can be spared, or in other words not so. The Vaiṣṇava's concept is that all living entities are part and parcel of the Lord, and the living entity is gradually evolving through different stages of life. This is confirmed in the Padma Purana, where the Lord says, Jalajāvanava lakshani sāva lakshani vimsati vimaya ruja samkhyaka pakshna dasa lakshani chatu lakshani puncha lakshani pashiva chatu lakshani manusya. In the Padma Purana, it is established that there are different stages of life, beginning with those that live in water that number nearly 1 million. Then there are those that live on earth but which cannot move, like the trees or the flowers or the plants, which number nearly 3 million. Then there are those that belong to the insect category, which number about 1.1 million. And then there are those that belong to the bird category, that number nearly 900,000. And then there are those that belong to the Pashuvas, to the animal category, that number 3 million. Those that cannot move actually number 2 million and not 3. And the human species number only 400,000. So we add all this together, it comes to 8,400,000. So the Vaiṣṇava understands that all these 8,400,000 species belong to the Lord's universal body. And because all these species belong to the Lord's universal body, the Vaiṣṇava is respectful to each and every entity. This was very nicely exhibited in the story of the hunter who was made a devotee. This hunter took great pleasure in half-killing animals. And when the great sage Narada Muni appeared on the scene, questioning who was responsible for half-killing these animals, the hunter very proudly appeared on the scene and boasted that this was his family tradition. And this is how he made a living. But anyway, by the association of a great exalted devotee like Narada Muni, the hunter was transformed into a devotee of the Lord. And after he was transformed into a devotee of the Lord, he became so cautious that he would not even step over an ant. So when one develops the complete spiritual understanding, that is, when one is a Vaiṣṇava, then one is respectful to each and every living entity. Therefore, the Vaiṣṇava, before he eats something, he offers it to the Lord. Because the Vaiṣṇava feels that he has no right even to kill plants. Because plants also have a life. Very often vegetarians argue that you people, why do you eat plants? Because plants also have a life. So our answer is yes, we recognize that they have a life, but we are offering them to the Supreme Lord before eating. Because by this transcendental process of offering them to the Supreme Lord, not only does a living entity who eats benefit, but also the plant is able to realize liberation. So this is actually also liberating the conditioned soul. We are liberating one who is entangled in these lower stages. So those with the forefront of knowledge, of course, can never really understand this, just like the impersonalists and those with the forefront of knowledge. They cannot understand how the Supreme Lord is residing in his transcendental abode. At the same time, his influence is spread everywhere. As Muhammad says, Goloka eva nivasati akilatma duka, that Krishna is residing in a spiritual abode of Goloka Vrindavan, but at the same time, his influence is spread everywhere. Just like the sun disk. Now residing in the sun planet, the influence is visible everywhere. And the Brahma are also informed that overall it's transcendental to the extent that with any one part of his body, he can perform the function of any other part. Anmani yasta sakalanda vidhimanti. Any one limb, he can perform the function of any other limb. So, the different types of transcendentalists cannot really understand this. This is only the Vaiṣṇava who has complete information about the Lord through the Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures, who can understand and appreciate it. So Prahlad Maharaj is over here describing Śukadeva Gosvāmī to be very opulent. Parikshit Maharaj says, "O greatly fortunate and opulent Śukadeva Gosvāmī." So one may question, how is Śukadeva Gosvāmī opulent and fortunate? Because Śukadeva Gosvāmī didn't even have clothes to cover his body. Śukadeva Gosvāmī, from the moment he came out of his mother's womb, he just left home. In fact, as the story goes, he was refusing to come out of his mother's womb for a very long time. It was only after Lord Krishna personally came from Dwarka and promised him that he can come out of his mother's womb did he agree to come out. And as soon as he came out of his mother's womb, he left his father's house. In fact, Vyasadeva was an attached householder. Of course, we have to understand that Vyasadeva was a transcendental personality. We cannot imitate him. And Vyasadeva, as soon as Śukadeva came out of his mother's womb, he ran after his son. In fact, Vyasadeva was an attached householder. Of course, we have to understand that Vyasadeva was a transcendental personality. We cannot imitate him. And Vyasadeva, as soon as Śukadeva came out of his mother's womb, he ran after his son, requesting him, "Please stay at home. I've been waiting for 16 years for you to come out. Now as soon as you come out, you left your house." And then Śukadeva Gosvāmī created a devil by which the devil came back and he went on. just traveling from one location to another. So Śukadeva Gosvāmī didn't even have any clothes to wear. In fact, there is this story in the Bhagavatam how Śukadeva Gosvāmī was passing by a pond where the ladies were taking their bath. But when they saw Śukadeva Gosvāmī passing by, the ladies did not even bother to hide their sacred parts. Whereas when they said yathā, they did. Because Śukadeva Gosvāmī was completely liberated, and they knew it, that he would not be attracted or tempted by anything. So Śukadeva Gosvāmī didn't even have anything in his possession, and still Parikshit Maharaj is calling him opulent. So why is that? Because Śukadeva Gosvāmī had the devotional service to the Lord. He had unflinching faith in the Lord. He was firmly fixed in the thoughts of meditating and remembering the Lord. Therefore, he is called opulent. Just like in the story of Sanatana Goswami in the text of this Brahman had pleased Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva guided him to this sage in Vrindavan who had a touchstone that could convert anything into gold. And actually did touch everything into gold. But later on, when this Brahman went back to Sanatana Goswami saying that this is definitely not the most valuable thing that you have, because if this is the most valuable thing that you have, why is it in the garbage? And then Sanatana Goswami gave him the chanting of the holy name to the Lord. So the point is that one who's a devotee of the Lord, he is considered to be the most opulent and the richest. Because devotional service to Krishna is a real treasure. Devotional service to Krishna is the real fortune that one can have. The rest of the treasures, whether they be bank balances or whether they consist of family members, these are all destroyed over a period of time. Therefore the Bhagavatam calls them to be fallible soldiers. They are not infallible soldiers. Whereas devotional service to Krishna is defined as, is considered to be like an infallible soldier. Because devotional service to Krishna remains one's eternal companion. Devotional service to Krishna is the real fortune. Rupa Goswami has also described different types of happiness. He talks about happiness by the process of impersonal realization, or the happiness that one can get by performing some material activity, and the happiness that one can get by rendering devotional service to Krishna. And Rupa Goswami says that even if the happiness that one gets by the process of impersonally merging with the Supreme is multiplied 1,000,000,000-fold, it cannot compare to a small fraction of the pleasure one can get by serving the Lord. And he concludes that even happiness obtained by material activities is very, very temporary. You can see that very clearly in the case of Maharaj Chitraketu. The story of Maharaj Chitraketu is very exemplary because we can see the same thing which is the cause of giving us pleasure at one point becomes the cause of a disease later, becomes the cause of a suffering later. Maharaj Chitraketu took great joy at having this young son. First he was in great anxiety and very sad because a son was not born to him for such a long time. Then by the grace of the great faith and Gita Muni, a son was born. Then he became completely attached to the son. And then when the son was withdrawn, he again became very morose and sad. So we can see from the story of Maharaj Chitraketu that the same thing which gives us happiness today will give us misery tomorrow, as long as that is not devotional service to the Lord. Any material activity that gives us pleasure today will be the cause of severe suffering later. Take, for example, the different simple activities that the living entities are engaged in. Take, for example, meat eating. All those that are eating meat will have to severely pay for it. The Vedas inform that even if one eats a small piece of meat, he has to take his birth equal to the number of hairs in the whole animal's body. Take, for example, illicit sex. The Bhagavatam Saskanda describes that for engaging in this illicit sex, after death, one is sent to the planet where the male is made to embrace a burning rod-like form of the woman, naked form of the woman, and vice versa. So one may be running after this. The present day matureless are very proud of their sex powers. They very proudly boast, how many women they've had affairs with and so on. But if that is a standard of obtaining credit, then the pigeon should get greater credit than us. Because the pigeon is able to engage in the sexual act 50 times a day. And he's still going strong. And these pigs and the horses, if that is the standard of receiving credit, then these different animals should be decorated with a lot of gold medals. So the point is that if we engage in these activities which are outside of the limits of religion, then again there is very severe punishment. So the point is that for these sinful activities there is very severe punishment. The nature of the sinful activities are divided into three categories: pataka, mahā-bhāga, and ati-pataka. That is, some sins that are mature, some sins that are lying dormant, some sins that are about to fructify, the sins that a living entity performs. It is not necessary that the reaction is realized right away. Some the reaction may be felt, some are about to fructify, some may take a little bit of time. But we should not forget that the reaction will definitely be felt. So the Vaiṣṇava, he knows that there will be a reaction. The materialist is blind to this fact. The materialist is blind to the fact that by engaging in sense gratification, he will have to pay a price. But the Vaiṣṇava is more intelligent. Just like a child may be running after touching a bottle of poison. But a child doesn't know that this poison is harmful. But the mother knows that this poison is harmful. So the mother snatches the bottle away. The mother trains the child up so as to guide the child to stay away from objects that are detrimental. So similarly, the Vaiṣṇavas, they have to train the society up so that the society can be made to discriminate between what is right and what is wrong. When Devahuti asked Śukadeva to describe these scientific, one thing is free from the cycle of birth and death, Lord Kapila described devotional service. So he did not describe pure devotional service right away. He first described devotional service in the mode of ignorance. Then he described devotional service in the mode of passion. Then he described devotional service in the mode of goodness. And after all this he described devotional service in the mode of pure goodness. So the point is that the Vaiṣṇava, he gradually wants to bring the living entity to the point of performing devotional service to the Lord. In the initial stages, one may render devotional service even in ignorance. Just like when we perform our Sankirtan, we get people to give some type of donation under various pretexts. It may be under the pretext of giving them a flower, maybe under the pretext of giving them a sticker or a painting or whichever. But we are engaging such an individual in the process of devotional service. But this is known as devotional service in ignorance. But I think that's a beginning. So similarly, one can also perform devotional service in the mode of passion. So one can also perform devotional service in the mode of goodness. Devotional service in the mode of goodness is defined as one, for the performance of which, one is expecting something in return. One understands that Krishna is the supreme, but one is trying to still do some type of mercantile business with him. one is offering the fruits of his work, but the goal is again to realize something in exchange. So that is devotional service in goodness. However, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that even approaches him with motive that is superior to the other types of entities who worship the demigods. Worshipping Krishna is definitely higher than worshipping the demigod or not worshipping any demigod or the Lord at all. So, the Vaiṣṇava, he exactly wants to engage people in the process of devotional service because he knows that it's māyā-sukha. The Lord Maharaj uses this word, māyā-sukha. Māyā-sukha means temporary happiness. This māyā-sukha is illusory. This is just like one is walking in the desert, and in the desert he is claiming that he found some water. So the materialist statement that there is some happiness in this material world is simply illusory. Just like a mirage in the desert. In the desert actually there is no water. So when the devotee, he hears that the materialist are thinking that there is some temporary happiness in this material world, he knows that this is nothing but illusory. Therefore, he is like Prahlāda Maharaj. The devotee is considered to be opulent because he has learned how to glorify the transcendental qualities of the Lord and to be in ecstasy. The devotee, because he is absorbed in meditating on Krishna, is always in ecstasy. He has no fear. This was also shown in the case of the Durvasa Muni and Amrish Maharaj. The Durvasa Muni was very proud of his yogic powers, and he thought that he can take revenge on the Amrish Maharaj because he thought that Amrish Maharaj had offended him, whereas in reality Amrish Maharaj had not offended him. But anyway, when the Durvasa Muni released, pulled the hair out from his head in order to harm Amrish Maharaj, Amrish Maharaj continued to meditate on the Lord, Bhagavan Mana Krishna Padaravinda, and he meditated on the Lord, and he was successful to the extent that Durvasa Muni, when he was being chased by the Sudarshan Chakra of Amrish Maharaj, he ran to Lord Brahma and he asked Brahma, please help me. But even Brahmaji said, I cannot help you. Then he went to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva also said, I cannot help you. Then he went to Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu said, Lord Narayan, he cannot help him also. And then the Durvasa Muni came back to Amrish Maharaj, and Amrish Maharaj pardoned him. That is another feature of the devotee. Wow, there's another yogi over there. And Vyasadeva was writing that one must control his mind, and controlling the mind is very difficult. And the yogi said, why do you say that it is difficult to control the mind? It is not difficult to control the mind. So Vyasadeva said, okay. And Vyasadeva gave the yogi a hut to live in on that night. And he told him that you can take shelter in this hut, but do not open the doors to anyone. Even if there may be some robbers and animals that will come and knock at the door, but do not open the door under any situation. Anyway, in the night, Vyasadeva disguised himself into a very beautiful woman, and he knocked at this yogi's door, saying, I'm a young girl and I'll be left alone in the forest seeking shelter. And of course the yogi wasn't opening the door, but anyway later on he did open the door. And Vyasadeva was there in the form of a beautiful young woman. And after letting the woman stay in the corner for some time, the yogi's senses became very agitated, and he approached the young girl. And then when he approached the young girl, then the young girl revealed her real identity as Vyasadeva, and the yogi felt very ashamed. So the point is that it doesn't matter how great a transcendental one may be, the mind is very, very fickle. The mind has always to be brought under control. So the Bhagavad Gita, there's a nice analogy how one can do that. Because we're all living in the mature world. And the analogy is given that just like different animals bring up their offspring for different ways, like they taught to us, that brings up its offering by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are on land, and it is in water. But just by meditation, it is able to bring up its offering. So just like that, the devotee is in the mature world, but he is meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna. So by his meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna, he is able to cross over this mature universe and mature existence. So the devotee is fixing his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. He knows that worshipping the Supreme Personality of God is the greatest opulence, and this is the real fortune, as Parikshit Maharaj is saying, oh greatly fortunate. This is real fortune. This is confirmed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Brahmanda Gamite Kuna Bhagavana Ji Guru Krishna Kripapai Bhakti Lata Beach, that after traversing through millions and millions of universes, if we the fortunate soul who is injected in the process of devotional service. So those who take into this Krishna consciousness are really fortunate. Those who take into Krishna consciousness really know what is wealth. Real wealth is devotional service. Everything else is temporary. Everything else stays for some time and then it disappears. But the devotional credit stays with one eternity. And this was exhibited in the case of Arjuna. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked, what is the position of one who takes to the process of devotional service and then is unable to complete it? And Lord Krishna replied that nothing was lost, one just continued to the point that he has stopped. So this is real opulence, and the fortune entity is one who takes to the process of devotional service. And Prabhupada explains in teaching the Queen Kunti that those who have now become fortunate, they have to make other people fortunate. Those who were unfortunate have now become fortunate. Namely, the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement, who at one time were attracted to garbage and now become attracted to clean environment. They should now make others fortunate. Just like Prahlad Maharaj is saying, my dear Lord, I have no anxiety for myself. So the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement, they have no anxiety from the angle that they have been revealed with what is the perfect science for them to engage in. So in that angle, they are very fortunate. But now, they have to make others fortunate. That is, they have to broadcast this Krishna consciousness in the same mood that Prahlad Maharaj has done, in the same mood that mahā-bhāga has done. Mahā-bhāga has fasted for 48 days. He was about to break his fast, and with some food stuff made of ghee, butter and sugar. A Brahmana came in, then a Chandala came in, a man came in with some dogs. Then finally he was just left with some water, and he even parted with the water because a thirsty man came in, begging, please give me some water to drink. So Mahā-bhāga, by this process, he parted with all the food and water that he had. And then, after he had parted with everything, he prayed to the Lord. Nat namaya ham gatim ishwar param arthati yaktham apuna bhava. He says that, my dear Lord, I have no desire for myself, nor do I want any of the 8 different types of mythic perfections. But what I want is to stay on this planet till everyone who's adhunā, till everyone whose dukkha becomes adhunā. That is, till everyone who's miserable becomes free of misery. So that is the mood of the Vaiṣṇava. The mood of the Vaiṣṇava is to make everyone who's in misery, free of misery. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada talks about 3 different types of Vaishnavas. There is the Kanishta Vaiṣṇava, there is the Madhyam Vaiṣṇava, and there is the Uttama Vaiṣṇava. The Kanishta Vaishnava is one who is only interested in his own liberation. Just like if you go to Vrindavan in India and you go to the other holy dhams in India, you will see a lot of people who are devotees of Krishna, but they have no concept of preaching. Their only concept is how can they realize liberation. So these are called Kanishta Vaishnava. So when the Vaishnava has the concept that is being explained in this verse and in the course of Vaishnava, that is, to save the others, then he is known as the Madhyam Vaishnava. In the Madhyam Vaishnava stage, the Vaishnava is in the preaching mood. And then in the Uttama Vaishnava stage, the preaching mood is further exemplified. So, Prabhupada explains in the same purpose that the devotees in the Krishna conscious movement are not expected to perform at the Kanishta Vaishnava level. The Kanishta Vaishnava level is being operated upon by many other Vaishnavas. The devotees of this Krishna conscious movement are expected to perform at the Madhyam Vaishnava level minimum. It means the devotees in this Krishna conscious movement are constantly to be engaged in this task of saving the conditioned soul, in this task of reducing the Lord's anxieties, in this task of guiding the suffering humanity on the path back to Godhead. Definitely this task may be troublesome. Nothing big is realized without going through a lot of trouble. If you analyze or talk to any salesman who made $1 million, he'll tell you how he had to work hard, how he had to sacrifice his family life, how he had to sacrifice the golf, how he had to sacrifice everything just to, work hard and make money. So nothing big is realized without going through extensive trouble. So similarly, if we want to realize this love of God, if we want to be instrument in distributing this love of God, then we also have to be prepared to go through the trouble, to go through the difficulty. It should never be forgotten that these material impediments which may be there is actually a test from the Supreme Lord. The material impediments are there, and the Lord is testing. Is my devotee going to fall in this or not? Is he going to struggle or not? And when he sees that the devotee is serving him with determination, then the Lord also reciprocates with such a devotee and takes him back to the eternal plan. Krishna says, nārdhāna, beyond the Satyaloka. There are, as we said earlier, 14 different planetary systems. There is Bhuraloka, Bhuvaloka, Nānogra-yātanān, Satyaloka. But even Satyaloka is material. Because even if you go to Satyaloka, you can again descend to the material planet. But then the Lord takes him to his personal planet, the Vaikuntha planet, where the living entity again never appears in this material world. So the point is that the devotee is willing to undergo difficulties on behalf of the Lord. The devotee is absorbed in meditating on the Lord. And because he is absorbed in meditation on the Lord, he doesn't really feel any pain. So when one is absorbed in meditating on the Lord, then one doesn't notice anything else. Just like on the street. Many of you may be seeing these, everyone's in the mood of walking around with a Walkman, on the road. And the latest is, you can have a FM stereo radio with the headphones and so on. But these people, when they're walking on the road, they're so absorbed in listening to their music that even if something happens, they don't even notice it. Isn't it? The economies are discovering so many techniques of absorbing the people's minds. Just like I was in Ottawa yesterday, and my restaurant in Ottawa, they have what they call relaxation music, just the latest gimmick. Just come up with some music that they're heavily promoting now, which we guarantee will enable you to relax. So the kindness we also receive when they're absorbed in something, they don't really notice anything else that may happen. So similarly the devotees, because they're absorbed in thinking of Krishna, because they're absorbed in meditating on the spiritual master's instructions, and the Supreme Lord's instructions. Even if they have some so-called material difficulties, they are able to overcome them with ease. That is the point to understand. Those material difficulties may be there, but the devotee is willing to struggle for it. For him, struggling for Krishna is simply a burden of love. The devotee understands that there is a spiritual famine in the world. The Lord is opulent, complete in all respects. The Srila Bhagavatam says that the Lord is hungry. Now what is the Lord hungry for? The Lord is hungry for receiving the sacrifices from the humanity. That is the only hunger that the Lord has. The Lord is hungry and He is waiting for the sacrifices. So, the devotees, they want to fulfill the Lord's hunger by teaching everyone how to engage in performing sacrifices. The Lord is complete except in one area. He is hungry for sacrifices. And the devotees know the technique of satisfying the Lord's hunger. They satisfy the Lord's hunger by offering, dedicating their works, and they try to satisfy the Lord's hunger by getting other living entities also to offer the rewards of their works, to dedicate their works to the Lord. So this should be our mentality, which is remember that there is a spiritual famine on this planet. We should understand that the Lord is hungry, the Lord is waiting for these sacrifices from the living entities, and the devotee works towards fulfilling the Lord's hunger, towards solving the spiritual famine, by being absorbed in Krishna consciousness very tenderly, and by being absorbed in thinking of techniques, how this Krishna consciousness can be spread for the benefit of entire humanity. Hare Krishna.
Rama